I have often asked myself, what would I spend more time doing? The answer might be, spend more time with the people I love. I feel it's all about relationships. That is what life is made up of. One of my favorite quotes that makes me feel guilty at times is, on their deathbed, nobody has ever wished they had spent more time at the office. There are some relations you cannot choose, like your parents or your siblings, but there are some you could, like your friends or spouse. The bottom line is, to maintain enduring and happy relationships, you need to have mastery over yourself. Every relationship is different, but can fit into one of the categories. I will pay more for the ability to deal with people than for any other ability under the sun, said John Rockefeller. All over the world, we find that we do not have business problems, we have people problems. When we take care of our people problems, most of our business problems are automatically resolved. Why do people deal with us? They deal with us not because we are the smartest people. They deal with us because they are comfortable dealing with us. What gives them the level of comfort? People don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. It is always the intangible which is called the X factor. People knowledge is more important than product knowledge. Successful people build pleasing and magnetic personalities, which enables them to attract the right people in their environment and secure friendly cooperation from others. A pleasing personality is easy to recognize but hard to define. It is apparent in the way a person walks and talks, the tone of his voice, the warmth in his behavior, and his definitive level of confidence. Charming manners that disguise a poor character may work in the short run, but character reveals itself rather quickly. Relationships based on talent and physical appearance alone, without character, can make life miserable. Charisma without character or personality without character is like good looks without goodness, which becomes unbearable after some time. The bottom line is that a lasting foundation for an enduring relationship is a winning combination of character and charisma. Factors that prevent building and maintaining positive relationships: selfishness and inconsiderate behavior, not meeting commitments, unrealistic expectations from each other, rude and discourteous behavior, low moral values or conflicting values, lack of integrity, self-centeredness, arrogance and conceit, poor listening skills, jealous and suspicious nature, manipulative behavior, escapist behavior, past bad experiences, inflated ego. The difference between ego and pride. The biggest hurdle in building a positive relationship is ego. Ego is self-intoxicating. Ego is an unhealthy pride that results in arrogance. Healthy pride is a feeling of accomplishment with humility. If there is a battle of egos, relationships cannot be won. Tell me, is it worth winning an argument and losing a friend? Is it worth winning an argument and losing a marriage? Is it worth winning an argument and losing a job? It is certainly not worth it. An argument stems from an inflated ego and ruins all relationships. A man puffed with ego once bragged, "My son gets his intelligence from me." His wife replied, "I'm sure he does, because I still have mine." Ego, the know-it-all attitude. To an egocentric person, the world begins and ends and revolves around him. The person who has a know-it-all attitude, "no one can teach me" attitude, stops growing in life. Such a person is hard on hearing, doesn't accept people's suggestions, can't get along with people, and leads a miserable life. Selfishness and self-interest. It is important to know the distinction between selfishness and self-interest. Selfishness is based on the principle, for me to win, if others have to lose, It's absolutely fine. Whereas self-interest says, for me to win, the world doesn't have to lose. We can both win together. A person who is interested in his betterment works hard to better himself each day and does not compete with others. Selfishness can be negative and destructive. It destroys and ruins relationships completely. It believes in the win-lose principle. Self-interest is positive and believes in win-win situations. How do people come into our lives and for how long? Some people come into our lives for a reason. Many relationships are very short and occur for a very specific reason. Sometimes they come and then go away forever. Other times they are ongoing but intermittent. These relationships need only brief, periodic cultivation. A good example of this kind of relationship is one with my doctor. I never would have met Dr. Joshi, my physiotherapist, if it hadn't been my tennis elbow. I consider him my friend and my doctor, but I see him only a couple of times a year and it's always related to my health. Here is a person who has come into my life for a particular reason. Some people come into our lives for a season. A second type of relationship lasts only for a period of time. These relationships may last only for a few weeks or as long as several years. Many times they are related to our current circumstances or situations. But just because they are temporary doesn't mean they are not important. You give your best to that relationship as long as you are together and maybe even afterwards. Many work relationships are of this kind. You work on a project with a colleague, and when the project gets completed, both move on in different directions. There is very little reason or occasion to keep in touch. Perhaps that's just the way these relationships work out. Some people come into our lives for a lifetime. The third kind of relationship is ongoing and permanent. These are few and very special. If we want to keep them healthy and encourage them to grow, we must give them continual cultivation. Otherwise, they are likely to shrivel and die. They need sacrifice, commitment and time to blossom beautifully. Another important relationship one has is with his or her spouse. Men and women are so different that it's not always easy to cultivate a really good relationship. Marriage partners who don't intentionally cultivate a close relationship will drift apart. Some marriages may be made in heaven, but the maintenance must be done on earth. Another most important relationship anyone has is the one with our parents. They are often taken for granted because we know they will be there with us and for us forever. Respect, love and gratitude is required to nourish this relationship. Effective interdependence can only be built on a foundation of true independence. Never jump into relationships without the maturity and the strength of character to maintain them. As we become independent, proactive, centered around correct principles, value-driven and able to organize and execute around the priorities in our life with integrity, we can choose to become interdependent, capable of building rich, everlasting and highly productive relationships with other people. The most important ingredient we put into any relationship is not what we say or what we do, but what we are. If our words and actions come from superficial human relation techniques rather than from our inner core, others will sense that duplicity. We simply won't be able to create and sustain the foundation necessary for effective interdependence. Why and what do we invest in such people? The relationship bank account. We all know what a financial bank account is. We make deposits in this account or save money for the future so that we can withdraw whenever we need. Similarly, we open a relationship bank account when we deal with people. Relationship bank account is a metaphor that describes the amount of trust that we deposit in a relationship. If I make deposits in a relationship bank account with you through courtesy, kindness, honesty, and keeping my commitments to you, I make an investment. Your faith in me deepens, and I can call upon that trust many times if I need to. Our most close relationships, like marriage, parenting, and friendships, require a constant investment. Our RBA is very much like checking an account at a bank. You can make deposits and improve the relationship, or take withdrawals and weaken it. Although there are similarities, the RBA is different from the financial bank account in some ways. Unlike a bank account, you may have only one or two or maybe three accounts, but you have an RBA with everyone you meet. If you smile and say hello to someone, you have just opened an account with that person. If you ignore him, you still have opened an account, but you have made a withdrawal. Unlike a bank account, once you open an RBA with another person, you can never close it. That's why when you run into a friend you haven't met for years, you pick up right where you left. Not a penny is lost. It's also why people hang on to grudges for years. How can you build a relationship or repair a broken one? Understand the individual. Really seeking to understand another person is probably one of the most important deposits you can make, and it is the key to every other deposit. You simply don't know what constitutes a deposit to another person unless you understand that individual. What may be a deposit for you, for instance, going for a walk together, to talk things over, going out for ice cream together, working on a project, might not be perceived as a deposit at all by the other person. One person's mission is another person's minutia. To make a deposit, what is important to another person must be as important to you as the other person is to you. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. I think the more essential meaning is to understand them deeply as individuals, the way you would want to be understood, and then to treat them in terms of that understanding. Our tendency is to project out our own autobiographies, what we think other people want or need. We project our intentions on the behavior of others. Do small acts of kindness. Have you ever had a day where everything went wrong and you felt totally depressed? Then someone suddenly out of nowhere comes and says something nice to you and turns your whole day around. What a wonderful feeling! Sometimes the smallest things, a hello, a kind note, a smile, a compliment, a hug, can make such a big difference. Small acts of kindness don't always have to be one-on-one. Follow the rule and treat others as you would want them to treat you. Think about what a deposit means to someone else, not what you want as a deposit. A nice gift may be a deposit for you, but a listening ear may be a deposit for another person. The little things are the big things in life. As the Japanese saying goes, one kind word can warm 3 winter months. Think of how many winter months you can warm by your words of kindness. If you have something nice to say, don't let that thought just rot. As Ken Blanchard says, unexpressed good thoughts aren't worth squat. Don't wait until people are dead to give them flowers. People are very tender and very sensitive inside. I don't believe age or experience makes much difference. Inside, within the most toughened and calloused exteriors, are the tender feelings and emotions of the heart. Keep commitments. Keeping a commitment or a promise is a major deposit. Breaking one is a major withdrawal. In fact, there's probably not a more massive withdrawal than to make a promise that's important to someone and then not to come through. The next time you make a promise, people won't believe you. People tend to build their hopes around promises, particularly promises about their basic livelihood. Adopt a philosophy never to make a promise that you won't be able to keep. Make a promise carefully, very sparingly, and be aware of as many variables and contingencies as possible so that something doesn't suddenly come up to keep you from fulfilling it. Sometimes, despite the best efforts, you create a situation where it is impossible to keep a promise, but you value the promise. Either keep it anyway or explain the situation thoroughly to the person involved and ask to be released from the promise. If you cultivate the habit of always keeping the promises you make, you build bridges of trust that span the gaps of understanding between you and other people. Clarify expectations. The cause of almost all relationship difficulties is rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and foals. Whether we are dealing with the question of who does what at work, how you communicate with your parents or children, we can be certain that unclear expectations will lead to misunderstanding, disappointment, and withdrawals of trust. It's so important whenever you come into a new situation to get all the expectations out on the table. People will begin to judge each other through those expectations. We create many negative situations by simply assuming that our expectations are self-evident and that they are clearly understood and shared by other people. Show personal integrity. Personal integrity generates trust and is the basis of many different kinds of deposits. Lack of integrity can undermine any other effort to create high trust accounts. People can seek to understand, remember the little things, keep their promises, clarify and fulfill expectations, and still fail to build reserves of trust if they are inwardly duplicitous. One of the most important ways to manifest integrity is to be loyal to those who are not present. In doing so, we build the trust of those who are present. When you defend those who are absent, you retain the trust of those present. Apologize sincerely when you make a withdrawal. When we make withdrawals from the relationship bank account, we need to apologize and we need to do it sincerely. Great deposits come in sincere words. I was wrong. That was unkind of me. I disrespected you. I should never have done that. It takes a great deal of character and strength to apologize quickly out of one's heart rather than out of pity. A person must have a deep sense of security in fundamental principles and values in order to genuinely apologize. Leo Roskin taught, "It is the weak who are cruel. Gentleness can only be expected from the strong." People will forgive mistakes because mistakes are usually of the mind, mistakes of judgment. But people will not easily forgive the mistakes of the heart, the ill intention, the bad motives, and the prideful justifying cover-up of the first mistake. Don't let your pride or a lack of courage stand in the way of saying sorry to people you may have offended, because it's never scary as it seems, and it will make you feel so good afterward. It needs to be added that sincere apologies disarm people. Paradigms for building enduring and happy relationships. We now go on to see the fundamentals on which enduring relationships are based. We can also see how powerfully scripted we are in our thought process and behavior. Stephen Covey, in his book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has beautifully depicted the paradigms for victory in public life. They are: think win-win. We come across various situations in life. They are win-win. It is a frame of mind and heart that constantly seeks mutual benefits in all human interactions. Win-win is a paradigm that there is plenty for everybody, that one person's success is not achieved at the expense or exclusion of success of others. Win-win is a foundation for getting along well with other people. It begins with the belief that we are equal, that no one is inferior or superior to anyone else, and no one really. Win-win views life as a cooperative arena rather than a competitive arena. Win-lose. It is an attitude towards life that says the pie of success is only so big, and if you get a big piece, there is less for me. So I'm going to make sure I get my slice first, or that I get a bigger piece. Win-lose is competitive. Sometimes win-lose situations are unavoidable. For example, if you have to win a football match, the other team has to lose. Win-lose is full of pride. In such a situation, people are prone to use position, power, credentials, or personality to get their way. Lose-win. It is a doormat syndrome. It says, have your way with me, wipe your feet on me, everyone else does. Lose-win is a weak situation wherein it's easy to getting stepped on. Lose-win people are usually quick to please or appease. Such people have no standard, no demands, no expectations and no vision. Such people bury a lot of feelings, but unexpressed feelings never die. They are buried alive and come forth in uglier ways. Psychosomatic illnesses, particularly of the respiratory, nervous and circulatory systems, often are a reincarnation of deep resentment and disappointment. People who are constantly suppressing their feelings and desires find that lose-win affects their self-esteem and eventually it affects the quality of their relationships with others. Lose-lose. When two stubborn, ego-infested individuals interact, the result is lose-lose. Some people become so centered on an enemy, so totally obsessed with the behavior of another person that they become blind to everything except their desire for the other person to lose, even if it means losing themselves. Lose-lose is the philosophy of conflict and war. It is a philosophy of a highly dependent person without inner direction who is miserable and thinks everyone else should be too. Win. People with the win mentality don't necessarily want someone else to lose. What matters is that they get what they want. When there is no sense of contest or competition, win is probably the most common approach in everyday negotiation. A person with a win mentality thinks in terms of securing his own ends and leaving it to others to secure theirs. Win-win, no deal. If individuals don't come up with a synergistic solution, one that is agreeable to both, individuals go in for a win-win, no deal situation. No deal basically means that if we cannot find solution that would benefit us both, we agree to disagree agreeably. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Seek first to understand involves a very deep shift in paradigm. We typically seek first to be understood. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. They are either speaking or preparing to speak. Seeking first to understand means to diagnose before you prescribe. As the American Indian proverb goes, listen or thy tongue will make you deaf. We simply do not listen. We need to have empathic listening, listening with the intent to understand. Do not push, be patient and be respectful with people. The greatest need of humankind is psychological survival, to be listened to be understood, to be affirmed, to be validated and to be appreciated. Synergize. Synergy is two or more people working together to create a better solution than either could do alone. It is not your way or my way, but a better way, a higher way. Synergy is acknowledging, appreciating and celebrating differences in people. Let's cultivate the beautiful garden of human relationships. Let's resolve to be tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving and tolerant with the weak and wrong. Because sometimes in our lives we would have been all of these ourselves. Thank you.